young people have a restless quest for purpose. And it's government's duties to give them platforms where they can discover their purpose.
Hi, I'm Ian Bremmer, and welcome to the GZERO World Podcast, an audio version of what you can find on public television, where I analyze global topics, sit down with big guests, and make use of small puppets. Let's get to it.
The GZERO World is brought to you by our founding sponsor, First Republic. First Republic, a private bank and wealth management company. Imagine a bank without teller lines, where your banker knows your name and its most prized currency is extraordinary client service. Hear directly from First Republic's clients by visiting firstrepublic.com.
Shamma Al Mazrui, the Minister of State for Youth Affairs in the UAE. Wonderful to be with you again, Shamma.
We're so delighted to see you again.
So, you're in a very young society. Even in that context, you're on the young side of that. Why don't you start by just telling me how it feels to be minister with portfolio as when you started a 22-year-old?
When I think of my role, I think of myself as a designer. And I'll tell you how. I play a dual role. So I'm a government official, but I'm also a young person. And as a government official, I create kind of services for youth. But as a young person, I'm the end user. And I think this gives us tremendous value in my job because my life as a young person informs the service I give. If you think of tech-savvy companies, they design products not for what they think young people or people want. They design a product that the end user needs. And they have fast cycle iterations, etc. When you're a policymaker and kind of in a designer mindset, you are sitting in the shoes of the end user. And I think this is something very special that the UAE has done. It's not just me, but also everyone in the Office of Ministry of Youth is a young person.
How is life different for an Emirati, a young person today, than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
So you mean 10 years ago, 20 years ago, our parents' lives were...
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think the major change is that our world has changed. Our young people today are trying to build a world that is more inclusive, that is more tolerant, and making sure that this world works for us. Maybe when we look at our parents and our grandparents and the founding fathers of the UAE is less than 47 years old. They were trying to build a nation where 7 emirates were unified. And you look at the two worlds.
Your country is less than 50 years old.
Yes.
So your parents and your grandparents were building a country.
Exactly.
The country is now there.
Exactly. What I think is interesting to look at is back then, 50 years of our nations right now is built by oil. The big question is, what will our next 50 years be built on? So the challenge young people face is, how do we transform our UAE oil-based economy into a knowledge-based economy? And to be honest, the answer to that is very interesting because it involves young people. Maybe my role or my success rate is, how do I make sure young people's ideas and talents freely flow to solve challenges to move to a knowledge-based economy?
Now, you have the good fortune of being in a very wealthy country, and it's not all that big. It makes it easier to manage. But what do the young people want that they're not getting today? Where do you see dissatisfactions that need to be addressed in your country?
You might know that the majority of young people in the UAE go to the public sector. For stability, security, they prefer public sector jobs. But
True across most of the Gulf,
Yes,
actually.
the Gulf.
Yes.
And this has caused kind of this...
They're also higher prestige in the way they're perceived.
Exactly.
Maybe don't have to work quite as hard.
I think
I'm
we
not
work
talking
as
about
hard.
you, but the general perception.
General perception, yes, and especially longer working hours in the private sector, et cetera. I think it's a general perception.
Yes.
But so what are we trying to do about this? We did surveys on entrepreneurship, and we want to encourage young people to be entrepreneurs. We realized that 55% of our youth want to be entrepreneurs, but there were big hurdles that they faced. Some were kind of getting financing. So what we did was we worked with the Minister of Finance and the Minister of Economy and the Central Bank to try to find what policies can we do to change the lives of young people who want to be entrepreneurs. So if you look at
And is that happening?
Yes, that's happening right now.
Give me a figure that proves that. Do you have a data
So
point?
now, yes, so 30% of a government procurement must come from these SMEs.
In All fields?
All governments, federal and local.
And all
fields.
So that certainly is a boost.
That's a boost.
For smaller
and we're excited
companies.
Exactly.
So there isn't a ministry for old people in the UAE.
No.
Because they're just going to die soon anyway. It's okay. I mean, you can say it. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, we're focusing on the youth people, and the youth for our demographic anyway. They're puppets, it's fine.
I think the UAE looks at, 50% of our population are youth. If we invest in them, that's 100% of our tomorrow.
Very good. When you think outside of the UAE, who's getting it right for the young people right now?
I'm not going to say there's one country that gets it right, but when you look at the youth field,
Who inspires you?
there's so many. I think our leadership inspires me.
Outside of your country?
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau
Yes.
in the youth field. I think they're walking the talk with youth.
How so?
They have a youth council, but they're also working on trying to create something like a kind of national service where on your CV for 1 year, they're still figuring it out, but they haven't implemented it. But basically, every youth has to serve their nation somehow. I could be a nurse in a hospital. I could teach. And I think this is fun because we realize that young people have a restless quest for purpose. And it's government's duties to give them platforms where they can discover their purpose. When you think of young people in the Middle East, I think the first thing that comes to everyone is Arab Spring. And I think the Arab Spring showed the world, not just the MENA region, that youth have an important voice, but also that governments must be connected to their young people. It's not an easy task, and I'll compare and tell you what the UAE did. The MENA region, more than 60% of their population are youth. That's a tremendous volume.
Youth under 35.
Under 35.
Under 35, yes.
And what's happening is some governments are still hesitant to engage with their youth. And you can see it around the world, not just in the MENA region, but specifically the MENA region with this youth bulge that sometimes they see as a challenge, the UAE sees it as an opportunity. And I think some governments see, 20% plus unemployment in the MENA region. That's a dangerous constant that hasn't moved. Job quality is a challenge. Education is a challenge around the MENA region. And I think a lot of governments still think, wow, how do we even solve this? And they're hesitant. I come from a nation where we're never hesitant. They take big risks and big bets on youth.
Now, it's absolutely true that when you think about the Arab Spring and you see the people that were on the street in Tunisia and in Egypt, for example, I mean, they were mostly young people and they were empowered by technologies. To what extent do you see a desire for that kind of change in your country? In other words, change that's faster than what the government could possibly withstand.
We come from a nation that's very will-powered. We don't only focus on, when you think of the UAE, you think oil and trade or cutting-edge infrastructure. We have cutting-edge youth development. Women, I think the UAE is one of the nations in the MENA region that has a law and a decree where women have to be in boardrooms. We have the first gender balance council in the region. We have the first female speaker of parliament.
There's when you say in boardrooms, there's a quota for women on all boards?
Yes. And it's enforced. If you look at education, 56% of graduates in STEM are female. If you look at the workforce, 60% of government officials in federal government are female. And 30% of them are in leadership positions. So it's not just on youth, but also on women we're moving the dial. And I think it's a country that wants to keep raising the bar and be competitive.
Can fresh insight from young people also help to resolve some of these horrible conflicts in the region? I mean, such a big fight now between, the Emiratis, the Saudis, and Iran.
If you look at Yemen, I think all of us are concerned about the ongoing crisis in Yemen. And we all want to make sure that there's a legitimate government in Yemen that can help good people go to work. We don't want a lost generation in Yemen.
And yet today, the UN still refers to Yemen as the worst humanitarian crisis in the world.
Yeah. And I think it concerns us all because we want to make sure that we don't lose this generation, especially this young generation. We're part of a globalized world, and if they don't have hope, if you don't see your young people as assets, hopelessness results.
Now, I want to ask about you a little bit. You're 25 years old, and you're a member of cabinet. What kind of pressure does that put on you for the next thing you're going to do?
I think I'm always under kind of pressure, but it's good for me. That's how kind of I run. It makes my adrenaline run. It makes me, and we have a leadership that when you achieve something, that's not enough. You have to think of the next big achievement.
People around the world are going to see you, and they're going to see this inspirational figure that is their age and say, aha, like I relate to that person, right? So what do you think about your future career? What are some things that excite you, some things that you think I might want to do over the course of what's going to be a pretty long life?
I think it's my first role in government and in public service, and it opened so many doors for me to understand what are the key issues around the world or even in our nation that we can help solve. But most importantly, I think as a person, it gave me the courage that young people can do it. And anyone who says young people are unfinished adults has kind of a different view, because we did it in the UAE and it's been successful.
What's the skill set that you don't have yet? That you would really like to have or develop, let's say in the next 5 or 10 years?
There's so much. Oh my God, I want to do so much.
I'll start with a big one. Give a skill set.
Skill set. So I want to get more knowledge, theory, and practice in research and collecting quantitative data. I'm very interested in that aspect. It's related to the youth field, but also in general. I'm interested in learning another language. I'm interested in...
Any particular one?
No, I know Chinese and I know French and Arabic and English, but I wanted another, I think Russian.
You got to do 5. 4 is really
Russian.
Inadequate for a 25-year-old, I think.
Russian, I think, is interesting.
Можно, если хочешь практика, пожалуйста. Go ahead.
My brother speaks Russian, so I want to learn Russian. And my dad, he speaks Russian.
Really? 4 fluent languages? Is that true?
Do you speak Chinese? No.
No, I just speak Russian.
Oh, okay.
A little French, but my Russian's actually good. So
It sounds amazing. My dad speaks Russian.
Why? Why does he speak Russian?
He studied in Russia.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Are you having fun? Are you taking time for yourself, for your friends, right? I mean, you know, I remember as a 15-year-old in college, sometimes when you accomplish a lot at a young age, you're not breathing. Are you breathing?
So I'll tell you, I started breathing 2 years ago. Not my first year.
At the ripe old age of 23.
Yes.
22, you didn't breathe at 22.
22 was, I think, when you first come into a new position and you're a new employee, I was like, it's embarrassing to even request 1 day off. It's your first year.
What was your epiphany? What suddenly, how'd you make that change?
I think after 1 year and understanding kind of your job and your role and your mandate and responsibility, and also growing and developing a team and building the capabilities of your team, I was able to realize, you know what, I think rest is like a pause and a stop that will help me restart. So I took 3-4 days off, and it was like, for me, I've never taken a holiday where I paused completely. I was a student when I was at Oxford or even at NYU. It was focus, and learning as much as I can. And so that holiday was like an epiphany. It was like, wow, that's why people take holidays. It was remarkable to really kind of discover how sometimes when you rest, it helps you come back with so much energy and focus, and you see your work in a different light. It's like a new dawn, and you take a new road. What were you doing? Where were you?
No, I was a professor at Stanford. I started teaching at 24. I got my PhD at 24. And my advisor said, I wanted to go and leave and come to New York and get a job, because I'd never had a job. I never had a job. You had 2 jobs already. I never worked for anyone. So, you know, you go to school, undergrad, master's, PhD, straight, I'm ready to have a job. He said, no, I want you to be a professor. You're going to stay here at Stanford. I said, no. So he called my mother. And he said I was crazy and that I was not going to accept this position. So everyone convinced me to take the job. So I took the job. So I'm 24. I'm teaching at Stanford. And I hate it, because I have no experience. I have nothing to teach. Like, I'm funny, but it's not useful. So I quit after 2 years, because you can't quit before 2 years. That's that you feel like you hadn't tried it. And then I came here, and then I started the company.
I think when you live in New York, you can't live anywhere else, right?
Completely. Yeah. I don't even like, I'm from Boston. I don't even like New York. And then as soon as I moved here, I'm like, I'm never moving.
Yeah, no, I love New York. I must say, it was nice.
So the United States is still the world's largest economy. You come here a fair amount. If you had any advice, when you see our government, when you see youth in the United States, what would you like to see us do differently?
I would love for a lot of youth in the United States to connect with other youth around the world.
You don't think we do that?
Maybe not enough. I think I've lived in New York a bit and in DC, and I went to other parts, and I feel like a lot of my American friends, don't know about other nations. Some do, those who come and study abroad, but who have the luxury of doing it. But others don't. And I think sometimes they look at the news and they're shocked.
Her Excellency, Shamma Al Mazrui, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Such a pleasure.
That's our show this week. We'll be right back here next week, same place, same time, unless you're watching on social media, in which case it's wherever you happen to be. Don't miss it. In the meantime, check us out at GZEROmedia.com.
The GZERO World is brought to you by our founding sponsor, First Republic. First Republic, a private bank and wealth management company. Imagine a bank without teller lines, where your banker knows your name and its most prized currency is extraordinary client service. Hear directly from First Republic's clients by visiting firstrepublic.com.
You're listening to the GZERO World with Ian Bremmer podcast, your weekly geopolitical deep dive into the world's biggest news stories, featuring in-depth conversations with global leaders and newsmakers. To get more of GZERO's insights on global politics every morning, sign up for our free newsletter, GZERO Daily, at gzeromedia.com.